We are going in deep, my friends. We are talking about what you believe about your inherent nature and the ripple effect that has had and may continue to have on your life. This is part 4 of our spirituality as a path to liberation, and I just think it keeps getting better. So let's get started.
Welcome to the I'm Perfectly Divine podcast, a place for the strong, sensitive spiritual seeker to recognize the perfection of your human journey as a pathway to remembering is to bridge both the emotional and spiritual worlds through proven and grounded frameworks that support you to live in the wholeness you already are. For over the past 2 decades, I have supported people from all around the world as well as Fortune 500 companies to dissolve the divisions within them and live with greater empowerment and love. This podcast is an exploration of the paradoxes that befuddle us as we live our lives being both human and divine. Together, you and I, along with other experts, will navigate integrating psychology and spirituality, the divine feminine and the divine masculine, the darkness and the light, to create greater sacred union from within. I believe through your remembering that you are innately divine, that you will allow yourself to more openly shine. So let's get to it, because your unique light is needed more than ever.
Hello, and welcome back to I'm Perfectly Divine podcast. We've been on a journey, haven't we? And I just want to say it has been so meaningful to be on this journey with you, to share all this that it has in some ways just been within me. And it just has felt like now is the time. It must come out, it must come forward. And I certainly appreciate your likes, your shares, and comments. So thank you so much for walking this with me. And so we've been on a path to our spirituality being a way towards our own liberation. And this runs so deep on so many levels because we are really here to help clear the way for our soul and spirit to unite as one. And as we know, on this human journey, it gets very tricky. And we've been told certain things, right, that unintentionally or sometimes intentionally may have kept us in the dark with um, being able to truly liberate our souls. And so I want to run through really quickly what we've covered. So this started back in episode 334, and you don't have to listen to these if you haven't, but this is just to give you a recap, a synopsis of what we were discussing. So it started with part 1 in 334, where I was really having my own reckoning with the fact that I was claiming for a while that I'm spiritual, I'm not political, and I really felt that the political was not my lane to be discussing. And really what happened was really recognizing that this is the whole point of our spirituality, that we have so much compassion that we learn to see ourselves and another, especially when they're in times of struggle and pain. And so that was 334. So you can go back and listen to that if you haven't caught that already. 335, part 2, we went back to through history to understand how the Christian narrative was shaped by politicians, by those who won, by the Roman Empire. And in doing so, it really impacted what teachings were offered and how the teachings of Jesus and Mary Magdalene together were squashed. And this is different. This kept from us really those who walked what is called the way, which was a path that really guides us to understand that our hearts are our own authority and no external authority should ever take precedence to our hearts. And then in part 3, so that's 336, we turn the lens on ourselves. And this one I thought was so important because again, of my own self-reflection of wanting to be good. Like when we're spiritual, we're very tied to an identity of being good. And it makes sense because our hearts are guiding us to know the truth that we are good. But how our egos can latch onto that. Our egos can latch onto calling ourselves spiritual, and or religious beliefs, and of course with politics. And then we've got to demonstrate and prove that we're right and we're on the correct side. And this can actually keep us complicit in acting out or saying that we're being neutral to something that's actually causing harm because we're trying to remain good by not rocking the boat, right? And so that whole piece was very important, I think, for all of us to explore, because what good person doesn't want to be considered good? And yet, how can we really recognize when the ego has got a hold of that? And so today, where we are landing is we are just, and this is the final one, part 4, and we are discussing something that I think is so important because this is a tender part of what we're going to be exploring even more than last week's episode, which is this invisible impact that what we've been taught about ourselves through religion and through spirituality that can actually hinder us from truly knowing ourselves and our self-concept. And so I believe that the story that you were taught about your fundamental nature gets impacted by these stories that we've been given through our religious and spiritual beliefs about who you are, and that impacts how you see yourself and how you made yourself to be in life based on these assumptions about yourself that weren't necessarily true. So I'm not talking about what you were told about what to believe about God or even about religion or politics. What I mean is like what you absorbed about your own nature, like really early on about your own nature. And just to take that in for a moment, like what is your fundamental nature? What were you taught to believe about your fundamental nature? Was your fundamental nature trustworthy or fundamentally suspect because of the stories that you received? And I'll raise my hand that for me as a woman, and that story about Eve did a number on me. It's not how I believe the story of Eve is actually what it's meant to convey, but how it is written in the Bible makes women kind of suspect rather than trustworthy. Or whether your heart is a reliable guide or is it a dangerous one because of verses that specifically tell us not to trust our hearts. Or whether you have to earn your way to worthiness or whether worthiness has always been yours. So due to the spiritual texts, we may believe that we're unworthy because we are wounded, we're fallen, like there's something inherently wrong with us compared to texts that have been buried or other spiritual beliefs that guide us to know that we are inherently worthy because you are loved and you are love, period. So these stories that we are handed to us about our very nature has a huge ripple effect on the human psyche that I don't think we can no longer ignore. And we are still experiencing this so much so today, even though these seeds were planted thousands of years ago. but the stories that carry on in the master narrative, that how it impacts our psyche about ourselves. So in episode 335, we looked at some of the biblical verses that were used to justify power over, whether that's wives submitting to their husbands, slaves obeying their masters, governing authorities demanding obedience. And these same verses also manipulated us to be controlled. They inferred that there's something inherently wrong that within us that needs to be controlled. And I'll speak for myself when I say that the story I received about my nature was I'm not enough as I am. I must earn my way back to getting to be a fraction of goodness, that my instincts and desires should not be trusted. They're sinful, they're wrong. My heart is suspect. My emotions are dangerous and not accurate. And I need an authority outside of myself to tell me whether I'm acceptable or not, whether I've met the mark or not of acceptability, of worthiness, of lovability. And as I speak these words, it makes me incredibly sad because I know I'm not alone. I've worked with enough people from different religions that have felt the same way. And what I know is, coming from having roots in Christianity, having studied the ancient texts, is that Jesus would not have wanted us to feel this way about ourselves whatsoever. And luckily, there are verses included in the Bible that shows us that we are made in God's image. And so we can infer from that, as it says in Genesis, we are made in God's image. And we can know that because of that, and we know the love that God is, that we are love as well. But we also have to navigate trying to remember our goodness while also being told one of the most damaging things to tell someone, as stated in Jeremiah 17, verse 9, where the heart is described as deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Like, I don't even have words for that, right? That is deeply personal and wrong, as it tells you that the very place you would naturally turn to experience the divine, experience love, and experience inner guidance cannot be trusted. Like, that right there is just very, very unhealthy. And so it starts really young for us. And it doesn't necessarily matter like what tradition you were grown up in, because your family may have been atheist, right? But your teachers may have had this framework in their mindset. Coaches, like other friends, families, or what have you, especially because for Christianity happens to be, I believe I know it's billions believe in Christianity. So let's just put it at that, and especially in the United States, right? So this had an impact on somebody in your life where these undertones can come through. And it happens when we are so young, as some of the scripture targets children for being wrong, just for being kids, for being playful, rather than serious and disciplined and responsible. As we're told things like folly is bound up in the heart, is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of discipline will drive it far away. So we get these really overly corrective measures that can happen from parents who think they're doing the right thing. but ultimately it is scary for a child to then trust themselves because our very nature of who we are exactly supposed to be as children was being judged and in worst cases being beat out of you. And just think about what that does to our nervous system. And so the problem is that even when we know in our hearts that isn't true, we end up being on some level on high alert, worried that we are, am I doing something wrong or bad? Because we've been taught that it's okay for others for us to keep judging one another. And like we're the ones in charge of if you're meeting a certain mark or not, like or standard, and it's crazy making and it's hurtful. And so even what we want to recognize is what is even worse, that this gets wrapped into these notions we are given about ourselves that tell us that we are wounded, fallen, and in need of redemption before we are worthy of love, even from the divine. Like we're just not worthy enough of God's love. And that creates a specific kind of psychological wound that makes it hard to be human. And I'm not saying we are wounded beings. I'm saying that imprint is telling us a lie in our minds on what it means to be human. And we live with that until we learn to question that, until we remember the truth of who we are. And so I don't know about you, but for me, for a long time, I struggled with being human. Like I really, I didn't get the point to being human. And I didn't get what a gift all my experiences as being human are for my soul. Instead, I believed the truth about being human meant being broken. And that's not a fun way to live. So I want to talk about the ripple effect that this has. And you can lean into or feel into whether you sense these ripple effects within you or within your family or people you know and care about. So the first ripple effect is that shame, especially in the form of being unlovable or unworthy, becomes our default response to being human. And so rather than understanding that missing the mark is simply a part of learning, and this is exactly what the ancient concept of sin was about before it was weaponized to control us, is that when we are called sinners and we take in that we're bad, we start to experience our mistakes as more evidence to our fundamental unworthiness, badness, brokenness. And that's just shame. And I don't see any correlation between who I know Jesus to be and shame. I just don't. Because shame doesn't teach us in any way that is healthy for us. It just makes us distrust ourselves, question ourselves, look for the wrong within ourselves, instead of understanding and seeing and having compassion for our inherent goodness that gets hidden behind our fears, behind trying to get it right. And again, I don't think this is by accident. As the less we know our true selves, the more paralyzed we become by shame. And then people operating that way are far easier to control than people that trust themselves. Number two, The second way this ripple effect is impacting us is that we stop trusting our own hearts. And this is huge because to me, when people say that they struggle with anxiety, it's because you're not trusting yourself. And this is how deeply imprinted that this sense of why we shouldn't trust ourselves and we should look to the external gets so deeply imprinted. So it doesn't matter if you believe your heart is fallen and deceitful. You just know that it's not trustworthy and it's not a reliable guide because those before you learned that that your heart is fallen and untrustworthy, right? And so it's like that saying that it takes like 7 generations to kind of heal these ancestral wounds. And again, wounds not being something inherently wrong about you, but these blueprints that we get taken on, that we take on until we're willing to question them, until we're willing to say, wait a minute. And so this leads us then, if we believe that our hearts are deceitful, to constantly look outside ourselves for validation to see, am I right? Am I good? And this is exactly how we are programmed to give our power away, whether that's to external authorities of religious leaders, political figures, our parents, an older sibling, anyone who speaks with enough certainty within themselves to fill the void left by our own self-distrust. And then we are more easily manipulated. So I'm certainly not saying that those sources, like your parents or your siblings, can't be reliable support to you, or even religious leaders. They can't. But ideally, they're guiding you to lean into you remembering your own truth and to find your truth and to know it's within you. And unfortunately, people who have been controlled feel like it is natural and normal to then exert control onto others. And what I'll say is even worse is that they feel it's their time, that they're due to be able to be in power and control over others because now they've reached a certain status or age or level of power. And that's when we should be worried. But someone who has been taught that their own heart is their own authority doesn't even look at others based on their external status. And that's the scary part to those who think they are owed control. And they really think they are owed it because of the times they've had to submit to it. And so now it's their time. So I'll leave it at that for the second ripple effect. Let's move on to the third one. The third ripple effect is that we become susceptible to shame as a tool for manipulation. So I've already discussed this on some level, but what I want to get into with this third point is that when you already believe that you are fallen, it takes very little for someone to weaponize that belief against you. Because here we can have this suggestion, let's put it that way, a suggestion that you're being selfish, sinful, heretic, unpatriotic. And that lands with devastation to the psyche when you are primed to believe the worst about yourself. So I get it, as a sensitive person, I get it. And that's why we do the work, not so that we become, not human. Our humanity is still going to feel it when someone's hurtful to us, but it just doesn't have to run so deep, right? That we're like, wait, I'm remembering my truth instead. That hurt, but I'm remembering my truth instead. And we recognize that when we are primed to believe the worst about ourselves, that shame is there to manipulate you, to silence you, to stop you in your track, to question you. Who do you think you are? Who do you think you are? This is the narrative that everyone else has followed along. And what's so special about you? If everyone else is able to follow the narrative, but you have a problem with it, the problem's you. And so we see the twisting, the manipulation to say, this is the box, stay in the box, don't question the box. And you're like, you know what? I just want to feel inner peace. I'm a sensitive person. I just want to feel inner peace. So you learn not to speak to what you know is true to you. And you retreat, and they got what they wanted, which is control over you through manipulation. Obviously, I'm speaking these things because I know them personally, right? Okay, the fourth is that we seek to feel special outside of ourselves. So when you don't know the specialness of your own heart and how this alone is your passageway to everything you truly long to feel from within, to what Mary Magdalene is pointing to us, we then instead are left with looking outwards. And so is it any wonder that so many of us are in pain? Is it any wonder that every time I've worked with someone, it's because they've been trained to look outward, and whatever that thing is outward that was supposed to give them identity stops working. And so, and I've done it too. We look outward for achievement, for validation, for proof that I'm somehow more special than others, to the authority figure who will finally tell us that we're enough, to a brand that says I'm special. And I'm sure, as you've experienced, you gain that achievement, and I don't know, it could be a couple minutes later, it could be the next day, but then your ego says, okay, now what? What's next? Because the ego always needs more, always. It's always outward seeking. And that outward seeking loop never delivers the harmony that it promises it's going to give us. If you just achieve this, you'll feel good about yourself. You'll feel at peace. But the truth is, harmony was never out there to begin with. And so we stay unsettled. We stay constantly trying to prove. We stay trying for that external measurement to make us okay. And again, it happens to us, and we have to be watchful for us when we're so identified with being spiritual or Christian or whatever it is. And we've got these special powers or this special connection, special, versus all of our hearts are so special because they're a unique expression of the divine. And you came here to be that unique expression that I could never be. And that's the love you are. The fifth ripple effect is what we lose access to our own, what happens when we lose access to our own inner guidance system. When your heart and your emotions are taught to be untrustworthy and unnecessary. And that one always is like, why would we have them if they weren't necessary? And so what happens is we just stop listening to them. Honestly, we don't have a good relationship, especially with our emotions. And when you stop listening honestly, you lose the ability to recognize when you have genuinely missed the mark. So that with compassion, you can find your way back to your truth, back to your heart. So instead, we have this cycle. It's built on the ego about defensiveness. And this always strengthens our ego and the ways that it blinds us from love and the love that we are. And so then we miss the mark and you feel shame. And then we've got to turn to some sort of coping mechanism, whether it's healthy or unhealthy, to try to suppress the shame. And then we ultimately just repeat the pattern over and over again. And now we are living in an internal hell on earth. And that is not how we are meant to be living. So it's very interesting to me that the very mechanism that was meant to clear the way to understand ourselves from the heart has become buried under layers of unworthiness. And then we dismiss our emotions and our heart as the allies and guides that they're meant to be. So, this is why ignoring these texts that have been excluded is no longer neutral to me, because with them included, it would be clear that the ways certain scriptures, certain texts within the Bible have been used to justify anything that isn't love is not the word of Jesus, is not, it's just not true. So while I look at the impact that this has on our psyche of not including these texts, I full-heartedly give thanks and hold on to the fact that the same scripture that tried to control could not contain the love Jesus was teaching. Like, it couldn't erase it, it couldn't bypass it. And so I know for many people that they have found healing in the true words that Jesus was sharing about love. And it has helped them heal from addictions and mental health struggles and loneliness and disconnection. So I truly feel that, know that, believe that. And I know with the teachings that were left out, left behind, especially those with Mary Magdalene, especially those that share about living the way to experience of the love of the divine within, that our human experience would come easier for some of us, because it certainly did for me. And I think for women in particular, when we're given the story of Eve, and especially at the very beginning, right? And it's like one of the stories that we're taught as children, and it's reflected back to us. We don't really see the inherent goodness that we bring, especially spiritually as a woman. It keeps kind of getting reflected to us that we are a, I don't know how to put it, like a side character, like just something that's kind of there but not important, rather than recognizing the vitalness to what the Gospel of Mary is saying. And there's so many aspects to it. First of all, it's helping us to clear the way so that we can get out of our own way, get out of the loops of our ego. And the feminine aspect is bringing balance so that we have humility, we have greater clarity, we are able to trust and have steadfastness, even when the world around us is in chaos. And these are certainly skills that we could use right now. And so what has been missing is part of the equation that's helping us to bring heaven on earth. And that the feminine aspects that the divine created could equally be respected and received for their unique wisdom. Not above, just balancing these energies. And this balanced restoration happens through honoring the divine feminine and the divine masculine in unison. so that we could not only improve our sense of self, because I believe we all have feminine and masculine energies and aspects within each of us, regardless of gender. It would improve our sense of self, our mental health, then, and our relationships. Because then, rather than this need to be right, I think we're more readily realize that we are actually on the same side, that we've always been working to uplift one another. And how we can create structures that are based on power with rather than power over. So I want to leave us with this concept that one of my teachers, Megan Watterson, shares from the Gospel of Mary that carries so much weight. And this is the verse that says, "That is why the good came into your midst, to the essence of every nature, in order to restore it to its root." Ugh, I just love it. Because at our root, we are good. The root has always been good. The root is not problematic. You are not a problem. You are not unworthy. And you certainly aren't broken, ever. We may forget, we may get lost, but we aren't broken. And that's so important for us to remember, because you are good. And I'll just say that that, to me, is a completely different starting point to a belief system about yourself. And your heart, when you listen to it honestly and without shame, will always, always show you the way back. Always. We just have to get quiet enough to listen. And then that knowingness comes forward. That's been there all along for us. We just have to learn to clear the way. And if I'll just say, if your ego is anything like mine, that could take a lot of doing. But it's always there, and it's always leading us to the next step. So I don't believe this is a naive view of human nature. I know some people feel like you need to see yourself as wounded, broken, fallen to improve yourself. But and that's how I think others have explained why people do bad things, right? But I don't think it has anything to do with us and our nature being bad. I get it. We cause, there can be devastating harm that we cause each other, and we cause each other unintentional harm all the time. But it's not because of our fallen nature. I believe it's because we have been taught to forget the root of our goodness, and then we feel that the only way we can get there is to keep proving it and proving it through external means that eventually we have to power over, and we have to negate our heart to keep doing that. And when we have a disconnection from our heart, we're going to do all sorts of things that aren't of our root. So while I believe there are so many vital aspects to the Gospel of Mary that we are missing out on by not having it be included, I think the most vital may be the confirmation of what your heart already knows, which is you are unequivocally good. And your good is simply waiting to be remembered. And the more you remember and the more you have these human experiences following your heart, it becomes deeply embodied. And then you are doing what you came here to do, which is to bring heaven to earth. And we do it all the time as well. We don't have to be perfect. We don't have to always get it right. We just have to remember the love that we are. And somehow that love has us act in ways that go beyond what our ego can ever imagine would bring us joy, peace, and fulfillment. So I will close, as I always do, by reminding you that there is nothing to fix, only to remember. Thank you so much again for being with me on this journey, and I'll see you next week.
I am so honored you have joined me today. If you enjoyed the I'm Perfectly Divine podcast, subscribe so you don't miss any of our power-filled episodes. Also, if you know another who is strong, sensitive, and spiritual, and wants to dive deeper into emotions and ancient wisdom so they too can create profound peace and fulfillment from within, please share this podcast. Thank you again for joining me, and I look forward to reconnecting with you soon.